Chapter 20. Gathering personal information. To elicit expressions of our emotions, we might pose questions to ourselves that pertain quite openly to our needs and our happiness as our highest good. We might ask, how do I feel about my existence? Am I happy? Have I ever been happy, and do I think I will be happy? What makes me happy? What makes me sad? What bores me, excites me, makes me angry or peaceful? What do I like or dislike? What matters to me and what does not? How beneficial or damaging to my happiness do I rate objects or events, and how do I rate them relative to one another? We might focus these open-ended inquiries on past or present object and events, or on our imagined future. We might also ask more pointed questions about our conditions and how we feel about them. Why and how did I select my profession, friends, love interests, where I live, or any other aspects of my life? What are my fondest and least favorite memories? What do I perceive, think, and feel regarding persons I know, certain types or groups of people, or humans in general? What do I like best about myself? Is there anything I do not like about me? Do I have enough time for me? Am I alone? Is there something missing? Do I harbor regrets? Of what am I most proud? What would I like to change? Do I have any hopes and fears? What are my ambitions? Is there anything keeping me from pursuing them? What does my ideal existence look like? Where would I be? Who would be with me? How would I live? What would I be doing? What would I do or be if I could do or be anything? What new experiences, what additional abilities would I like to have? If I had to be an item of a certain kind, what would I be or want to be? What do I expect to happen after my death? What do I imagine heaven and hell to be like? If there is a heaven or a hell, where do I expect to be? These are some of the questions that might lead to indications about our essence. Although they are existential questions, we may not have a ready answer to many of them. We may have to search our mind and deliberate extensively before we can give an answer we deem accurate. Yet even with contemplation, we may have difficulties finding satisfying responses. That can lead to essential self-awareness as well. But the demands of such questions may exceed our investigative or evaluative capability at this time. In addition, questions of this type may trigger defensive mechanisms. Hence, they might not cause the enlightenment we might expect. Eventually, we may have to ask these or similar questions to assume control of our existence and fulfill its potential. As we advance to cover the entire expanse of our personality, it may be unavoidable that we encounter the defensive barriers of traits, no matter how carefully we might pace and modulate our exploration. These may be positioned at different points and may be of various severity for each of us. But we must strive to defer encountering them until we have obtained better knowledge of our personality and are better equipped to overcome their defenses. We must have collected sufficient information at that point to prevent emotional traits from credibly denying their existence or from falsifying their nature. Once we understand the existence, constituents, and outline of emotional traits, it is harder to block or mislead our access. At that juncture, other emotional traits may be able to motivate us to deepen our knowledge so they can better deal with traits as actual or potential competitors. This motivation may be sufficient to defeat opposition by obstinate traits. Their resistance at that point may draw our interest, and help to illuminate them. To avoid provoking defensive action by our traits, we might try to avoid directly addressing objects and events that could have formed our traits or might pertain to them. We might inquire about our perceptions, rational thoughts, emotions, and behavior regarding matters that are unrelated to our life. We could ask what we would think, feel, or do if we were inserted into the plot of a movie, play, story, or book, the conditions of other individuals, or imagined situations. We might inquire about our views on purportedly superficial matters that do not seem to pertain directly to the essence of our traits. We could inquire about favorite and least favorable music, movies, shows, games, books, events, seasons, or characters in actual or imaginary contexts. The impressions garnered from such inquiries may give us important insights into aspects that occupy and define our emotional mind. The superficial information we receive may point us to common and idiosyncratic structures and processes and illuminate them. However, it might not clearly delineate underlying components to supply us an unobstructed picture of our emotional traits. Moreover, the amount and quality of information we can derive this way may remain limited. Based on our understanding that we undertake inquiries to discover our emotional traits, these are in danger of being channeled in ways that allow suspicious traits to conceal their nature. No artful indirect inquiry may be able to outwit them to an extent that allows the gathering of sufficient information without encountering their defenses. In an effort to outmaneuver these defenses, we may have to stray so far away from relevant inquiries that our answers become trite and do not lead to any revealing information. By contorting inquiries to avoid defense mechanisms, we may play into their hands and wind up with information that fails to reveal traits that opt to conceal themselves. The resistance by such traits to inquiries that we detect as unease and the unproblematic revelation of other areas may alert us to areas where additional scrutiny might be warranted. But defensive traits that hide in such areas are alerted as well. They may have such influence over our mind that they might succeed in averting our resolve to examine such areas more closely or to perceive correctly and process rationally what we find. They might even be able to curtail self-critical inquiries altogether to prevent us from isolating the problem areas governed by them. Obtaining useful information may therefore at least initially require a different approach that avoids prompting our mind for reactions. Instead, we may begin by giving detailed attention to the natural occurrences in our mind. This strategy takes account of the components and processes that we have normally at our disposal, our remembered, current, and anticipated experiences and the thoughts and emotional responses we attach to them. We monitor and register our perceptions, contemplations, and impulses and possibly proceedings by our council of traits. Our mind may volunteer a significant amount of important information if we listen. Beyond background and collateral releases from traits, we may receive targeted offers of information because our stance signals preparedness of our council of traits to take account of and harmonize our traits. Traits that deem themselves disadvantaged may take this opportunity to plead their cause. They may call out other traits that rather would remain concealed and go about their pursuits undisturbed. Confronted by opposition, such traits and openly dominating traits may feel pressed to counter. They may assert their position to preclude the accommodation of claimant traits or to channel our treatment of such traits. The ensuing debate may lead to an unrestrained exchange of arguments among interested traits during which concealing maneuvers might be futile. We may thus be able to collect all necessary ingredients for a proper determination by our council of traits. Only, at this point, we allow our traits to come forth and to argue without making up our mind. We assume the position of observers, taking full account of all our traits and all their arguments. Recording as much detail as we can is required at this juncture. The language or the presentation of our traits may not be succinct or coherent. We may not readily recognize what we detect or its source. We may have to capture features that are individually innocuous but may permit us a deeper understanding of our traits upon their subsequent assembly. We may be able to use these basic components to obtain a descriptive depiction of our emotional mind similar to how we would approach the assembly of a jigsaw puzzle. The only fundamental conceptual difference would be that we do not have the benefit of a sample image beyond general notions of common traits to orient ourselves. As in a puzzle, it is essential that we collect all the pieces and set them forth in front of us so we can assemble them. Single pieces might portray traits in their entirety. Then again, pieces might describe traits together with others. Each sensory, rational, or emotional experience is likely to be connected with other pieces. Together, these pieces form clusters that, in turn, are connected to other clusters, and so on until they give a picture of our emotional traits. We now have to find and collect the pieces that represent them and place them into view so we can determine how they compose our emotional mind. We may be able to collect pieces and clusters of our mind simply by monitoring and capturing them as they traverse our mind. However, we may also prompt them by techniques that evoke impressions. Under circumvention of pointed questions that might provoke our defense mechanisms, we may engage our memories. We may explore our emotional traits by sampling the historical range of our experiences. We might travel back through our memory and register perceptions, thoughts, and emotions that come to mind. We might ask how we felt about perceptive and rational information, how we perceived rational and emotional information, and how we thought about perceptive and emotional phenomena. Our answers to such inquiries come naturally because perceptive, rational, and emotional events are closely linked. An inquiry regarding one aspect unavoidably raises the other aspects. Our recollection may be assisted by present impressions of objects and events that took part in forming our impressions in the past or that are similar to those objects or events. By engendering a partial similarity of our present impressions, we may be able to stimulate our memory. Based on the recollection of some aspects, we may remember additional aspects. To facilitate this associative discovery, we may revisit objects, events, and persons associated with our memories. We may see persons who had a positive or negative influence on our life. We may re-encounter individuals who cared for, neglected, loved, hated, rejected, accepted, constrained, freed, hurt, or healed us. We may visit persons whom we admired, from whom we learned, to whom we felt a bond, to whom we felt enmity, ridicule, pity, envy, shame, uneasiness, or fear, or even people whom we regarded as irrelevant. We may also reconnect with people who were in the reverse positions of such types of relationships with us. We may see people with whom we shared good or bad times or who in other ways might have the same or similar memories. We may return to where we made our memories, the open areas, neighborhoods, houses, and rooms where we used to live. We may go again to our schools and workplaces, the stores, and leisure locations we frequented. We may re-experience or remember our toys, treasured possessions, clothes, foods, smells, music, habits, peculiarities, and events of the time. We may review documentary and emulated recordings of any kind that can bring us closer to objects or events of our past. We may recall and reconstruct objects or reenact events that impressed us or that coincided with experiences. We may let repeating events, seasons, and other similarities in auditory, visual, or other sensory experiences carry our mind back to us then. Many facets of former stages in our existence may strike us as childish. We may have left many of the subjects we encounter behind for good reasons. We may wonder how some of them could have held so much power over us. Notwithstanding our changed attitudes, many of our former impressions remain alive and continue to influence us by their reflection in structures and processes of our mind they helped to form. We are likely to have developed since our youth or later periods. But the person who came into being during that time continues to be a large part of us. Some experiences of earlier periods may gain relevance in our awareness only now that we can look back with some distance and appreciate the consequences. The changed perspective may give us an opportunity to understand forming influences that had previously evaded us. Going back in our mind also gives us an opportunity to put our current condition in perspective and compare it. The more rudimentary, and developing versions of us that we meet while we recall our past may appear more authentic than who we are now. They were closer to our genetic origins before they were modified and overlaid by acquired influences. Connecting back will evoke essential questions. How much have we remained the same? Why did or did we not change? Do we like who we were or have become? Are we glad or do we regret having or not having left certain aspects of us behind? Such considerations and questions may help us to assemble the necessary background and the motivation to adjust our traits once we have connected the underlying information to comprehend them. By focusing on our past, we are likely to regain access to areas of our personality that have been overshadowed, marginalized, and covered by various causes over the years. Compared to our later existence, earlier stages appear full of possibilities. They represent a time before we and others made decisions that formed much of our present. They may have been less affected by pressure, commitment, or the consequences of our decisions. They represent a time in our life when we did not yet suffer from extended periods of frustrations by our inabilities, lack of assistance, interferences, or general events that pulled us along. Some of that potential may have been channeled, cut off, repressed, abraded, lost, or dissolved as an illusion since. Remembering our beginnings may give us a chance to reconnect to them and to decide whether we can or should continue something we left behind. We might wish to regain or advance on former circumstances, talents, ambitions, or passions, or we might determine that the curtailment of earlier traits or tendencies was warranted. Such insights make remembering the way we were potentially valuable for our self-realization and growth. That these traits, components of traits, or possibilities of traits lapsed our mind may mean that we purposely reoriented ourselves. It may also mean that alternative traits developed in us or were inflicted upon us without our control and have held these aspects in abeyance. Either way, the intent and processes by which stronger traits repressed these hidden traits, components, and potentials may continue. By reanimating hidden aspects through recollection, we may reactivate competitive mechanisms and dynamics that led to their suppression or abandonment. Searching in our past and remembering how we used to be may thus threaten to throw us into the midst of a struggle that we are striving to reserve to the interpretive phase of our exploration. Resisting such involvement now will be rewarded by a fuller panoply of information that will facilitate our interpretation. We may record the perceptive, rational, and emotional impact of our discoveries as part of the information we collect. Yet, in the interest of gaining a full array of information without the infringement of prejudgments, this is not the time to dwell on them or to scrutinize their causes and effects. In addition to the impressions we can collect from our present and our past consciousness, we may extend our inquiry into the unconscious regions of our mind. We may believe that we can access this side by recording, collecting, and eventually interpreting our dreams. What occurs in our mind during our dreams has a markedly different quality compared to our mind's activity during our waking hours. Our consciousness takes on a different quality. Some of our dreams appear to be largely continuations or repetitions of situations and events we experienced when we were awake. Then again, our dreams frequently do not reflect that reality. Although much of what we dream draws on familiar places, persons, and events, all of our dreams confront us with various degrees of unfamiliarity, with divergences from waking reality in which apparently new content is intertwined with familiar aspects. That new content may be familiar by type, or it may constitute a fantastical concoction of familiar elements. The resulting story may present us with realities ranging from close similarities to what we have experienced or could experience in our waking reality to twisted and mysterious worlds that are incompatible with more of possibilities of a waking reality. Either way, these mental occurrences are enigmatic to us. We do not perceive ourselves as their author. When we dream, we seem to be immersed in a strange, fully appointed surrounding reality. Still, none of the elements we observe are so bizarre that we could not have imagined them. Our dreams appear to be a product of our mind. Except for sensory impressions we might obtain during our sleep, all constituents must have already existed in our mind before they were fabricated into a dream. Our dreams are apparently rearranging these constituents in stories to which we can relate. Nevertheless, we struggle determining their purpose in consideration of what they contain. This mystery about the purpose of our dreams prompts us to speculate. Are they based on random nerve discharges that our mind perceives as sensory signals and of which it tries to make sense? Is our mind trying to fit experiences during our waking hours? Is it ordering, connecting, or building some of its structures and processes? Is it repairing damage? Is it preparing for future tasks that are indicated by experiences? Are dreams exercises to keep unused parts of our brain from deteriorating? Possible as any or all of this may be, it does not seem to explain fully what we experience. Our dreams appear too coherent to be accidents and too elaborate and odd to be utilities. They also appear too varied to be part of a continuing program. Our mind incurs the effort of positioning us into intricate, elaborate productions with lifelike detail. We can have happy and unhappy dreams ranging over the entire spectrum of our needs. Either way, what takes place in our dreams keeps our sleeping mind captivated and highly functioning. We are experiencing our dreams from our viewpoint, and with a continued sense of our identity. We sense, think, and feel largely in familiar ways or within the range of our potential. Some of what we dream may be of a perceptive and rational nature. We may engage in complex external observations and contemplations. Yet many of our dreams feature prevalent emotional concerns and related perceptions. While external factual aspects might appear nonsensical in our waking appraisal of dreams, dreamed emotions and related perceptions appear to be authentic throughout, at least in their potential. Any emotional traits and related perceptions that we experience in our waking mind may also be active in our dreams. The intense preoccupation of ourself in the plot of our dreams with all our mental facilities gives us the notion that our mind is busily working on something important. The complex, inscrutable character of our dreams may prompt us to believe in the existence of a mostly hidden, powerful layer of our mind that we may designate our unconscious. It strikes us as absurd that we should have awareness of its existence and should be able to refer to sporadic recollected samples of its activities or at least their expressions, but that we should be unable to understand the work to which this sphere of our own mind is committed. Our lack of comprehension leaves us with the impression that we are missing significant knowledge about us. We may regard the inaccessibility of an evidently highly functioning part of our mind as a challenge that we must resolve. Our motivation to delve deeper into the unconscious regions of our mind further gains from the appearance that our unconscious is the repository for our mental traits. Many of the steering functions by our mind regarding our body entirely bypass our perceptive, rational, or emotional awareness. These vegetative functions constitute a type of mental trait on their own. But the other generation processes of our mind do not seem to be any less automatic. Our conscious mind appears to be a separate, exterior entity that takes notice of some production results without being involved in the production. It may have an impression of control because it has awareness of perceptive, rational, and emotional results. While some of these may arise obviously without our will, many occur because emotional traits act and direct our perceptive and rational facilities. Only, the motivations for these actions and directions are not directly accessible to our consciousness. Any process by which our emotional traits come into their own, contend, and reconcile through our council of traits is a function of these motivations. We witness aspects of these phenomena, and take ownership of them because they occur in our mind. But our awareness as an entity in conscious command of itself seems to be an illusion. Eventually, we may comprehend the formation and functions of our mental traits through science. Yet, even then, our connection to them would remain immediately unconscious and only accessible to our awareness by measuring their structures and tracing their processes. Our awareness would remain indirect and our determinations to interfere with our unconscious settings would still be driven by our unconscious. We may not object to such a detachment and illusion of command as long as we can afford our traits with the necessary knowledge so they can control one another and the rest of our mental traits in a fully considered manner. In the absence of scientific insights concerning our unconscious, or as a way to guide a more detailed scientific inquiry, we may speculate that we can shed light on our mental traits by investigating into the mechanics and purposes of our dreams. Understanding the functions of our dreams may be essential for gaining full comprehension of our traits. Dreams may fulfill an important function in their construction, preservation, and activities. Hence, we may deem an inquiry into our dreams to be a worthwhile undertaking in our self-discovery. Yet, strangely, a short time after we awake, we forget most if not all of what just strenuously preoccupied us in our sleep. This may be easily and satisfactorily explained if we have no interest in our dreams because their twisted or alternate reality does not appear able to carry solutions for our problems. Further, their content may be disturbing. It may bring to light or renew fear and pain from which we may want to distance ourselves. We might therefore want to forget such dreams. But dreams in which we experience pleasure fade just as quickly as our unpleasant dreams. Our inability to keep dreams present does not appear to depend on motivations and efforts of our conscious mind. It seems to be a function inherent in their nature or the nature of our unconscious. Then again, our conscious mind has lingering awareness of our dreams immediately after we awake from a dream. We may speculate that its failure to keep that awareness of our dreams results from the failure of such awareness to hold value for our conscious mind. One might take the position that, if such value existed, our mind would be more interested and would have developed in ways that absorb dreams into our recollection. That our mind has not developed this way appears to support the notion that the function of our dreams is adequately or better satisfied without the participation of our conscious mind, or that they have no function. Making dreams conscious without interpretive distance might produce adverse effects because we might not be able to distinguish their content from waking reality. These are not necessarily considerations in which we engage. We might take our fleeting awareness as a sign that humanity is at the edge of being able to make dreams conscious and expanding its awareness. Still, currently, the phenomenon seems to prove that high opinions about the capabilities of consciousness are unwarranted. There seems to be reason to question the representation of our unconscious mind through dreams. After all, the structures and processes that result in our perceptive, rational, and emotional traits and their workings seem to be focused on securing our survival and thriving in the world we perceive as reality. But our dreams neither reliably reflect the circumstances of our existence nor do they reliably abide by precepts of logic, natural laws, or even human laws. They do not seem to contain much practical information that we could use in our waking existence. They do, however, effectively confront us with pain and pleasure. The intense emotional challenges in our dreams suggest that we might have to concentrate on their emotional involvement to explain their function or attributes. The placement of dreams in a self-contained emotional mechanism that works below our awareness poses an enigma we may have to solve to fully understand our traits. In our dreams, instincts appear to respond to sensations of deprivation without a factual context that we recognize as real. As a consequence, they search our memory for facts that can be fitted to connect with their factual patterns. Dreamed needs may result from emotional traits that cannot motivate us appropriately when we are awake. The frequently primal types of needs and circumstances governing our dreams suggest that we experience needs in them with less inhibition than during waking hours because our conscious mind does not interfere. Maybe even acquired instincts that forestall their pursuit retreat. We may witness the relative state of our deprivation and procedures by our council of traits at basic levels. The emotions we dream may be expressions of formative events by which emotional traits develop and maintain themselves. Emotional traits may require different processes in these undertakings than perceptive and rational traits. Our perceptive traits are present and active in our dreams. But our dreams do not seem to labor with matters of external perception. In that regard, perceptive traits may be wholly developed as a genetic condition with acquired influences early in our life and may require no or only limited maintenance through our mind. To the extent such development and maintenance are necessary, Our waking hours when we are exposed to external sensory impressions would seem most relevant. Similar observations can be made about rational aspects. Our rational mind may differ by being highly dependent in its development and maintenance on mental activity throughout our life. Yet, here again, we appear to obtain most benefit from processes during our waking hours because we are then preoccupied with rationalizing our impressions. Although integration, construction, or other functions pertaining to external aspects of perceptive and rational traits may occur during our sleep, our dreams do not seem to be connected to such functions. Possibly, they spellbind us to allow these functions to occur in the background. More generally, the alternate reality of dreams may be necessary to preoccupy our impulses to prevent them from interrupting our sleep. Our emotional mind may also utilize dreams to undertake preparatory work. It may build emotional and related perceptive capacity that enables us to properly process experiences or to help us to withstand emotional trauma. Dreams of pain and pleasure may be a calibration mechanism for our compass of pain and pleasure, for our concept of good and bad. Feeling these emotions in our dreams may establish or reinforce the motivational range of an emotional trait, or it may be a precautionary and protective mechanism. It may be an exercise to keep us from incurring actual experiences of pain and have us seek actual experiences of pleasure. Our mind may try to address needs we have not satisfied by reinforcing our sense of deprivation, so we take action. To the extent we experience fulfillment of needs in our dreams, they might carry the function of impressing us with the desirability of their resolution. Our experiences in dreams could have any combination, all, none of these, or some other reasons. As long as dreams present such fundamental questions that we appear unable to answer, they cannot help us garner a better understanding of our mental traits. For now, we might have to turn to other ways of investigating the unconscious aspects of our mental traits and making them conscious. The detection and reconstruction of unconscious sources by effects that reach our awareness may be inexact and insufficient. We may impose interpretations on such information according to terms and parameters that may have little or no relevance in the realm of our unconscious. To access our unconscious, we may have to find ways to leave our waking mind behind. Because the unconscious parts of our mind dwell beyond the confines of our awareness, we may gain the ability to detect them by altering our conscious mind. We may use chemicals or other stimuli for that purpose. While this may facilitate access to our unconscious, it may also distract. We may not possess certainty whether our perceptions with external assistance are completely or partly experiences caused by this assistance, or whether they reflect a pure piece of our unconscious mind. Nor might the difference in states allow us to render our unconscious experiences conscious. We might merely fall into a dreamlike state. We might not be able to transport our conscious mind into that state. It may only appear this way, similar to how we seem to be conscious during our dreams. Nor might we advance in committing these experiences more to our conscious memory or understanding. Nothing might be won. To explore unconscious reality without disabling our conscious mind, we may strive to gain access to our unconscious mind through meditation. We may regard techniques that are guided or enabled by other individuals helpful in this undertaking. However, to exclude the risk of external influence, we may prefer to achieve access to our inner self without external interference or with only a minimum of facilitation. We may gain insight simply by letting go of purposeful exploration, by being tranquil, empty-minded, and listening into us. Our unconscious mind may voluntarily impart impressions to our consciousness that might be usually overlaid by superficial preoccupation with stimuli that require attention. Thus, at this point of apparently highest extension in our exploration, we may come back to the starting point of our exploration where we listen to what our mind volunteers. Only, this time, we might be freer of restrictions and more sensitive. If we intently look into ourselves and employ exploratory techniques, we can find a great range of information about ourselves. But finding that information does not mean that it is necessarily organized to where it is useful to us. We need to take account of the presence of all pieces of our mind we found and assemble them into a picture of our inner self. When we consider how we can derive a clear picture of our personality from all the impressions and insights we gather, the parallel to a jigsaw puzzle game continues to serve as a helpful illustration. To derive a picture of our inner self that makes sense, we have to allocate and assemble the pieces we have found. In a complicated puzzle game, we cannot commit the shape and content of each game piece to memory independently and merge the puzzle in our mind. A similar problem seems to exist regarding the assembly of a composite from impressions of our personality. We cannot well hold on to each impression in our mind while we look for other pieces or while we try to assemble the picture. As with puzzle pieces, we need a physical representation of the pieces of information about our personality to put them together. We need to see them in front of us to account for them and gain an understanding how they might fit with one another. We need to find a representation of our impressions outside our mind. Initially, we might choose a variety of media to fulfill that function, including writing and vocal or visual recordings in a diversity of storage and retrieval technologies. One of the most effective and most familiar means for us to formulate and capture our impressions externally would seem to be through writing. There may also be occasions where, at least initially, voice recordings form a superior record of our impressions in the most immediate manner. It may be easier or faster for us to voice our impressions than to state them in writing. Voice recordings may carry additional information in their tone and mode of delivery. Visual recordings in which we verbalize our impressions may supplement that information because they also capture our nonverbal communications. Depending on the ease of recording or importance of visual communication, audio-visual recordings may take the place of voice recordings. Beyond preferences caused by the particularity of circumstances, some of us may feel more spontaneous and fluent if we can speak our mind. Expressing our impressions in writing increases the risk that we may become more careful. We may distrust and be reluctant to disclose ourselves in writing because writing is a manner of memorializing information that can be immediately acquired by others without any display device. As long as we carry the suspicion that others might read what we write, we may scrutinize and edit what we commit to writing before, while, and after we write based on that possibility. We may care about impressions we might cause in others. We may be influenced by what they might think and how they might react, and we may try to gain a favorable or lenient response. We may justify and explain, embellish, hold back, omit, or falsify. Then again, we may encounter a similar problem with voicing our impressions in oral or audio-visual recordings. The direct recording of our voice or our body and behavior may add an air of immediacy and undeniable authorship that may caution us. The removal from immediate recognition, and the complication of having to find a playback device hardly seem to be distinguishing obstacles to their proliferation. Convenient distribution systems for such recordings and a lower threshold of effort to review them relative to writing may heighten our concern that others could access our recordings and that they might be publicized as items of voyeuristic curiosity. Even if we are not concerned about the secrecy of our recordings, we have to secure them from disclosure. The expectation or suspicion that they might be accessible by others may influence our expressions. It threatens to paralyze and falsify our recording of impressions. We might address this problem by selecting a repository for our impressions that is inaccessible to others. However, in many cases, our problem with communicative aspects is more protracted. Even the assurance that others will not have access to our impressions might not avoid all hesitation or ensure our honesty. Because writing as well as our voice and our demeanor are generally means of communication to other individuals, we might automatically be guarded in what we write, say, or how we behave when we are being recorded, even if there is nobody to receive our communication. Although we would record ourselves exclusively for purposes of communication with ourselves, the externalization of our internal processes in an act of communication may trigger inhibitions to fully express ourselves. If we are not used to such practices, it may take effort and familiarization to overcome this inhibition. This may be particularly so when we hear our voice or know that our image is being recorded, because vocal signaling and visual exposure are traditionally exclusively reserved for our communication with others. Writing may seem like a more familiar, a more intimate way of expressing ourselves to build and preserve a record of mental aspects. Yet even writing may appear uncomfortable and embarrassing because it continues to carry the connotation of a communicative objective. We may also feel awkward because most of us are not accustomed to exploring and expressing much of our inner domain or having that content represented externally. We may be unaccustomed to such an exposure of ourself and sense awkwardness until we become familiar with our reflection. If we detect stronger adverse reactions, these would have to be caused by an objection from one or more emotional traits. Defensive mechanisms might strain to prevent us from becoming aware of their presence, activities, or effects. Our apprehension that impressions will expose unwelcome information about ourselves might influence the expression of our impressions when we commit them to a medium. This apprehension might subdue the collection of potentially troublesome impressions regardless of the medium we might select for memorialization. We might already approach the induction of impressions with trepidation. At this preliminary stage, our defense mechanisms may be less concerned because they may still be confident in their reliance on familiar procedures to stifle painful impressions. But these mechanisms lose power after we commit an impression to a medium. Even if induction methods for generating impressions can circumvent our defense mechanisms, these mechanisms may be particularly alert at the moment when we try to memorialize impressions because this represents an important line of defense. We may sense a repulsion to express our impressions in any medium, because it forces us to part with an impression and commit to it by instilling it with an exterior existence we cannot deny anymore. Our fear that we will summon painful occasions by recalling impressions may increase when we grant them exterior existence. The memorialization of our impressions might be a point where our desire to improve our happiness has to contend most intensely with our fear of encountering painful events in connection with our improvement efforts. If we allow our defense mechanisms to consider our impressions before we commit them to a medium, these mechanisms may interfere and we may not be able to safely transport our impressions to the next stage in our self-realization endeavor. Our mindfulness of perceptions, thoughts, and emotions without immediately recording them may grant mental traits an opportunity to reflect on them, to detect incompatible elements, and to raise objections. To minimize the risk of such interference, it is important that we record our impressions immediately as they cross our mind without further consideration or evaluation. We cannot allow ourselves to ponder our impressions before we commit to them as correct or as ours. We must not even worry about placing them into coherent descriptions. We may be apprehensive that writing, oral, or audiovisual recordings might not preserve the meaning we attach to it. We may not be cued into reading our nonverbal expressions. Moreover, verbalizing places our ideas outside our immediate mental processes. We may be concerned that words have difficulties inducing the characteristics of our mind that we try to memorialize in them, even if they should be accompanied by vocal or visual exposure of our person. We may suspect that a part of the content will not be reconstituted in our mind because the medium of words intersperses an abstract and generalized distance. Such concerns may be diminished because we communicate with ourselves. As long as our mental concepts remain within the purview of our mind, words may serve as effective placeholders for them. It is therefore likely that we will be able to reconstitute perceptive, rational, and emotional concepts we memorialize by verbal representations or references in excess or modification of their plain meaning. Even if we represent our words in writing, their reconstitution seems to be facilitated by the fact that the acquisition of information from written concepts appears to travel along traditional channels for auditory and visual acquisition of information that humans developed long before the invention of writing. Employing auditory and visual processing may remain important to make the best use of our mental facilities regarding writing. As written representations, words are visual symbols for voice signals. Upon reading them, our mind seems to initially reconstitute them into the types of internal signals caused by oral impressions. We can detect this connection in our natural inclination to mouth words if we have difficulties determining their pronunciation in a written medium, or to read text aloud if we have difficulties understanding it. Even under normal circumstances, we seem to form vocalizations from written words in our mind. Upon such vocalization, our mind can process these signals under the use of its traditional facilities for language. Beyond the vocalization of words, their visual representation in writing alone may constitute a symbol for circumstances we would acquire through all our senses. They evoke described objects and events in our imagination. Our mind can thereafter process these memorized signals under the use of its traditional facilities for sensory processing. Because written words combine oral and visual representation, they may be particularly effective and efficient in memorializing and reproducing impressions. While more direct representations of objects or events may have a more precise and succinct impact, the use of words for creating impressions seems frequently superior because they can specifically name aspects. The representative quality of words we apply is further improved in our mind because we connect with each word concepts of our experience or imagination that are associated with other experiences. Our association of words additionally enriches their meaning. While verbal communication of our impressions and their associations might seem ambiguous to others, they may form effective and efficient representations for us, even if our collection of impressions consists of cryptic references. A recording of perceptive, rational, and emotional impressions in form of descriptions inexorably entails an interpretation and fails to preserve the immediacy of what comes to our mind. We must strive to minimize this effect by using descriptions that serve to retain in us a memory of the impressions that gave rise to them. Such a representative recording of our impressions may be encumbered because we may not be able to find an exact description for our impressions in words. Impressions may strike us in ways that do not lend themselves to succinct expression, or they may impact us in an indirect manner short of their underlying essence. We may have to engage metaphors, descriptions that, although they are not accurate in terms of the plain meaning of their expression, approximate the substance of our impressions. Metaphors may assume various, including non-verbal, forms. The metaphors in which our impressions find expression do not have to be our own. We already describe impressions in form of established symbols, illustrations, figures of speech, scenarios, and archetypes with a generally accepted meaning. In a way, all words constitute metaphors because they communicate a concept by a medium that represents but is different from the concept. Emotional impressions might particularly benefit from metaphoric representations. But they may also suffer the most because of the limited capacity of words to represent emotional content. This may prompt us to construct more elaborate descriptions of circumstances to describe an emotional state than would be necessary regarding perceptive or rational concepts. The difficulty of translating emotional content into words and to decipher it from them may further motivate us to attempt communicating it by its representation in visual, oral, or other sensory media alone or in supplementation of one another or words. Only, many of us may deem themselves unable to provide sufficiently clear and strong expressions in such media. When we choose words, a short situational expression may suffice, or we may require a more elaborating explanation to re-invoke an emotion. However, because our impressions may often be mere glances, extended storylines may not appositely describe them. This is particularly so if we use imported references. The additional components contained in such representations may confuse more than the congruences might assist, and they may dissipate or modify what we attempt to express. But we must stay clear of taking refuge in clichés that may overwhelm a nuanced represented meaning, and preclude deeper personalized insights. Unless externally supplied metaphors that come to mind happen to irreplaceably fit our impressions, we may be better off creating our own. We might be able to rely on well-chosen metaphors without a substantial loss or distortion because we communicate with ourselves and can therefore link our recollection to them. Then again, their vagueness may render even our own metaphors prone to confusion. The inherent imprecision of metaphors places us at risk of attenuating the meaning of an impression and changing its essence in their interpretation. They may leave openings for defensive mechanisms to affect the memorialization of our impressions. To avert such a usurpation, we have to try to name circumstances as they appear in our mind whenever we can. Attempts to find a metaphor may cause more damage to the memorialization of impressions than an incomplete or even imprecise initial recording. We may have to use metaphors as initial tools during collection for lack of better descriptions. We may have to resort to them as markers to save impressions from being forgotten, suppressed, or falsified. However, where we cannot escape metaphors, we will have to penetrate them as soon as possible thereafter to make certain we recall the original mental processes that led to them. Many perceptions, thoughts, and emotions we accumulate may be represented by aspects, fragments, and partial insights. We should not expect that we can put them in context right away and make sense of them. This piecemeal quality of self-discovery is not a disadvantage. It renders the daunting task of self-identification manageable. It increases the chances that our impressions will be in synchronicity with the length of time we can dedicate to recording them. Most of all, registering the raw impressions that strike our mind helps us to circumvent or defer the defense mechanisms of our mental traits. It keeps us honest in our effort to find our personality because we may not know their meaning and consequences. If we find and record the pieces of our mind without or with only partial context, without evaluating and correlating them, we lower the risk that we adjust these pieces to render them compliant with a predetermined notion we may have of our inner self. That notion may be directed and biased by certain mental traits. But even without their interferences, we may try to make sense of what we find. We are tempted to round off perceived rough edges, to fill voids in an incomplete picture, and to make pieces fit. We might even conceive puzzle pieces that do not exist. This disingenuity might lead our effort to recognize our mental traits astray. Beyond recording our impressions immediately in the condition in which they cross our mind, we must resist connecting our impressions to one another before we have accounted for them as completely as possible. Trying to put the puzzle together before we possess all or most relevant pieces would unnecessarily frustrate us. It would sabotage the natural flow of our realization process, and impede or prevent us from connecting the pieces with the relative ease that the possession of all or most relevant pieces provides. These troubles might reinforce our apprehension that we might not succeed with our ambition to gain clarity about our personality and allow our defensive mechanisms to claim an easy victory. Preserving the immediacy of our impressions is problematic because our mind is disposed to place all our impressions into context as they are being recalled and to retrieve together with them associated memories. This natural drive to associate impressions cannot be effectively suspended. It seems unavoidable that our impressions trigger an exploration of other pieces, particularly if our first impressions are not complete. They may stimulate our memory to produce additional important impressions. We may welcome and try to foster such associations. But we may not be able to forestall impressions by association that are manufactured by pressures of conformance with previous impressions. Nor may we be able to stem the influx of other manipulatory elements. The control by defensive traits may be so strong that capturing controversial genuine elements might be difficult. They might be buried in disingenuous impressions. To capture as many relevant impressions as possible, we may have to be amenable to induced impressions at the risk of subjecting inquiries to manipulation. Still, we must try to delay a contextual expansion of impressions and reserve it to a separate, second round of inquiry at which time we may have collected enough genuine elements to question disingenuous aspects. We may try to forestall the interference of defense mechanisms by monitoring our expressions regarding their authenticity. However, that monitoring and our determination whether an expression is authentic may play into the hands of defense mechanisms. If we tried to disqualify disingenuous elements at the collection phase, we might allow entrenched defense mechanisms to subject genuine aspects of our personality to their disqualification efforts. In addition, we would exclude from our consideration the very features of our personality that might stand in the way of its harmonization. We would disregard the subjects of their manipulation efforts together with them. A record of unencumbered impressions can greatly assist us in evoking, exposing, and ultimately defeating defensive mechanisms. Their threat can only be contained if we bring their objections to our awareness and record them as well. We must take account of them not only because they interfere with finding our personality but also because they constitute expressions of traits that define or attempt to define our personality. We have to record the impositions they generate, the triggers of these impositions, our preventive or remedial reaction to these impositions or our lack thereof, and the consequences. We must gather the courage to look in the mirror and not avert our eyes from disagreeable features, disfigurements, wounds, or scars that nature or others have inflicted on us or that we have brought upon ourselves. We must further gather the courage to identify and to describe the mechanisms we and others have created to prevent us from seeing ourselves as we are. Registering information regarding these mechanisms is a necessary step to becoming self-aware and self-determined. We will want to elicit them because they reveal important insights without which an assessment of our mental traits would be deficient. However, to make our inquiries as effective as possible, we will have to avoid pushing them to take preemptive action until we have elicited as much as possible about the subjects of their preemption. The best way to undertake that seems to be not to qualify our impressions during their collection phase. Our efforts may reveal elements that recognizably describe our personality as well as information that does not appear to immediately pertain or does not seem to pertain at all to our exploration. Much of the information we have gathered in our observational collection may not pertain to our mental traits in a definitional sense, but it may be more superficial. Much of what crosses our mind may seem irrelevant or distracting. Some of it might be coincidental clutter. Nevertheless, the fact that information occupies our mind may indicate that there is an ulterior reason for its presence. Although such information might not directly describe the essence of our traits, it may represent a general or a particularized expression of our traits that allows us to draw conclusions on the essence of our traits. It may also represent aspects that are on their way to establish or to shape traits. We must therefore do our best to ascertain as many pieces of our mind as we can regardless of what kind they are before we focus on what they mean and before we start putting them together and decide about their legitimacy or importance. We will know when our search has been exhausted because our discovery will increasingly yield repetitive impressions and will eventually cease to produce new insights. After we have completed the derivation of impressions through general collection methods, we may apply more pointed lines of inquiry that we previously avoided for fear that they would raise defensive maneuvers by our traits. Up to this point, we have developed our general understanding of wishes and needs and of mental traits, discussed methods for exploration and registration of information about them, and collected and recorded information about our emotional traits. We now have to assemble and assess that information with the support of our general insights to reveal and reconcile our emotional traits, so we can optimize them and the circumstances they conduct and influence in the interest of our happiness. The second part is devoted to these matters.